In this example, I want to go ahead and take a look at where we left off with our master details project. So I'm going to go ahead and start this up, and in the meantime I'll just kind of talk in the background. The way we left it from our master details project was we had some models that provided player records. The player records then populate our player list. And then we were able to get additional detail about each individual player. So if I click on Aaron Rodgers, I am selecting that record, and I'm transitioning over to a player details table view controller. And this player details table view controller is a little bit different because I'm using static cells as opposed to dynamic cells, where I've predefined these different sections that include our player data. Okay, so at this point, I'm able to select a player and hand that player off from my master player list over to the details, player details table view controller. Okay, so that's kind of the point we're at. What I want to do next is I want to enable the user to delete records, and that's kind of an easy process. So that'll be the first thing we tackle. And then ideally, they'd be able to edit these records. Okay, and then I want to be able to reuse this player details table view controller. So this is kind of set up for an editing situation, so the user could come in and say, well, Aaron Rodgers is now number 22, and then they'd have the option to save that. But I also want to allow the user to add new records, so I'm going to put a little plus sign up here, which would take me to that same player details table view controller. But in that case, we wouldn't be handling off a player, and these fields would be empty where the user could create a new player record. Okay, so we want to enable add, edit, and delete to this application. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to enable the user to delete records. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is in my players table view controller, so the master, if I scroll up to the top in the view did load. So in the view did load, we get all of our players, and then what I want to do is I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of some of this stuff. I'm going to get rid of the comments. The last one is kind of an important one. So you'll notice this right bar button item equals self.edit button item. So what I want to do is I want to do that, except I'm going to put the edit over in the left. Okay, and now if I run this, what you'll see is that we have this edit option, and this is a built-in function to table view controllers. So I can enable that edit button. When I hit edit, it allows me to remove these records. Okay, programmatically I have to do that though. So what I want to do is I want to code that so that I can actually remove those records. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is if I scroll down, there's a function that allows me to edit the record. So it's this one right here, to override to support editing the table view. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this out. Okay, and you'll notice that it gives me two different editing styles. I only want to handle the one editing style, so I don't want to necessarily use this to create a new record. I want to delete that record. In order to do that though, all of this should work just fine. So I can use table view.delete rows, add index path with a fade. This code is perfectly functional, but I am going to get an error. And the reason I'm going to get an error is because, so let's say I try to delete Aaron Rodgers. Okay, you'll notice I'm erroring out over here. And what's happening is I'm getting an assertion failure, terminating an app, invalid number of rows in section 0. And the reason I'm getting that is because the way my application is now working is one of the questions that gets asked to be a table view data source is how many players are in a section. Okay, and we're basing that off the player count. Well, if we remove a player from the user interface, but it's still in our players collection, so in our actual data source, then we're going to have problems. So what I want to do is I want to actually go back down. Before we actually remove it from the table, I want to go to self.players, and there's a method remove at, and it's asking for a specific row, so I'm going to use indexPath.row. So I'm going to remove the player from my underlying data source, and then I can remove it from the table view. And now I have a functioning delete, meaning I'm actually deleting the underlying data. So I can go ahead and edit. I want to say I want to delete Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is now successfully removed. And I could delete Mike Trout, and I could delete Derek Jeter, and my application now is not very functional. Okay, my player list is now empty. Okay, so we've enabled the delete. So the way we enabled the delete is we just uncommented this overridden support, which is commit for an editing style, for a row at, index path, where we're actually removing that record. Okay, next, what I want to do is I'm going to go over to the storyboard to do this. And in our player list, I want to allow the user to be able to add a new record. So in order to add a new record, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bar button item. Okay, and the item that I want is a system item to add. So it just puts that little plus sign there. And the plus sign, what I want to do with the plus sign is essentially I want to take you over to this navigation controller. So I'm going to trigger that segue. And you'll see I have two segues here. So the first one is player selected segue, and the next one is going to be player add segue. And I always want to name those segues just because visually in my scene I want to be able to identify what segue is which. And what'll happen now is we have to add some functionality into our application, but it should take us over to the player details screen. And the player's details screen is still working just fine. And the reason our player details screen is still working just fine is if we go back over to player details, we're checking to see if the player is populated. The player gets populated when the user selects a player. So if we come back over and we select Mike Trout, the player is populated, and then we fill in our outlets that we've identified. However, if we just hit add, then the player is never actually populated, and we're running into an issue there. Okay, so we're running into an issue, and you can kind of see it. So if I select Aaron Rodgers, it shows Aaron Rodgers details. But now if I hit the plus sign, it's going to bring up Aaron Rodgers. Okay, and what we have to do there is if we go back over to the player's table view controller, right here when we unwind, this is where we're going to run into an issue. Okay, so we're unwinding, and we want to make sure that we're unwinding correctly. So with the unwind table view controller, well, we could do this a couple of different ways, I guess. So unwind is fine. But really, what's going on is when we prepare for the segue, we have a selected player, and that selected player stays around. What we really need to do is we need to say that the self.selectedPlayer is equal to nil after we've handed it off. I think that's probably the easiest way to deal with what we were encountering. I could have done it on the back side of that, but the idea is if I hit plus, there is no selected player to hand off, and our player details is working fine. If I select Aaron Rodgers, the selected player is getting handed off to the player details screen, and now if I hit plus again, the selected player is nil, so we're not handing anything off again. So I think we're okay there. Now, though, comes the tougher part, which is if I go back over to the details, right now we've just kind of been canceling out of this and not allowing the user to do anything. But now we have a tougher challenge, and that tougher challenge is I want to enable a save. And when I enable the save, what's going to happen is I could either be saving as a result of the process being an edit, or I could be saving as a result of the process being a new record. So either edit or new record. And the save has to accommodate for both. Sorry, I'm going to add a bar button item. And again, I'm going to grab the system item, which is save, so we're consistent there. What's going to happen is when the user hits save, I have these outlets, and I basically want to hand those back over to the parent table view controller. And again, could be an edit, could be a new record. However, what's going to happen is really this save needs to trigger that segue back to the parent table view controller, the main table view controller, the master. The way we enable that is I'm going to control drag from the save to the exit. It's going to say, hey, there's an unwind to player list. That looks good. So I have the cancel, and then I have the unwind to player list. I'm going to give this segue an identifier. Save player details. Okay, and we can see that now. So right now nothing is coded up. It hasn't really changed. It's going to work exactly the same as our cancel. But I should be able to select Aaron Rodgers. And again, the idea is I should be able to change Aaron Rodgers to 22 and hit save. And that should be reflected in my player list. And you'll see that Aaron Rodgers, that record has not changed. I should also be able to go to the add and type in a new record. So dummy team and number 1 and save that. And the idea would be that there would be a new record here in this player list. Okay. So when we hit save, what we want to do is we want to actually update the record. Okay, and the way we're going to update the record is in our player details table view controller. Okay, so in our player details table view controller, we can delete some of the existing comments because we don't need them. And that'll just clean things up. So we have our table view data source. We don't need any of these commented outlines. All of them can kind of go away, just so we can clean up the player details. So the only thing we have right now is in the view did load. If there's an existing player that got handed off as a result of the user selecting the player from the master view, then go ahead and render that view, or go ahead and render that player within the outlets. Now, however, what's going to happen is when we hit save, we're actually going to trigger a segue. So I just want to show you that. So if we do a prepare for segue, I'm just going to do a print, saving. And we should see that print message actually show up here. Okay, so regardless of whether I do an add and save, so you'll notice I get saving, or if I do an edit, so I select Derek Jeter and I hit save, regardless of how I end up back at the master page, what's going to end up happening is that prepare for segue method is going to get triggered. Okay, and what we want to do with that segue is we want to determine, and I should be clear about this, we're going to run into some additional issues because we're reusing that player details. If I hit add, and the idea would be that I'm adding a new player, but then I cancel out of it, you'll notice that I also hit saving, and that's not really what I want to do. So I need to determine whether the user's actually clicking on save or cancel in that prepare for segue. Okay, and the way I'm going to do that is we know, based on our storyboard, that we've named our segues. So there's a cancel player details and a save player details. we're specifically looking for the save player details. So we're going to say if the segue identifier is equal to save player details, that's when we're saving. Okay, so now we shouldn't see this. Now we shouldn't see saving regardless of whether it was a save or a cancel. So we'll see it when we hit save, but we won't see it if I cancel out of that operation. It's only when I hit save. And that applies to the edit as well. So if I try to edit Mike Trout and I cancel, you'll notice that there's only 2 savings. But if I try to edit Mike Trout and I actually hit save, then that saving shows up. So this prepare for segue is happening only when I'm actually saving. Okay? What we need to do here is we basically have to say that the player that was either handed off, so this local variable that was handed off from the master page, or the one that we're creating needs to be updated to reflect what the users typed in those outlets. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to verify that the users actually entered something there. So I'm going to do an if let name equals name text field dot text. So if they entered something, I'm going to grab it. And if the team exists, and if the number exists, and this has to be an integer because that's the data type, so the number text field dot text. So I'm creating a number. So if I can get all of those different fields, so if I can do that, then I should be able to create a player. Where the name is equal to that name variable, the team's equal to the team variable, and number is equal to the number variable. Yeah, I want to force unwrap that because it's a conditional if I can actually do that type conversion. Okay, so I'm setting the updated player. So this screen, the details table view controller, has the updated player regardless of whether it was a new player or an edited player. That shouldn't make a difference. It just has the correct information now. And what I want to do is then when I go back over to the master page, where we're going to hook up with the master page is in this unwind to player list. Okay, so this is going to be an important one. Okay, so we get this unwind segue, and our unwind segue is going to get triggered regardless of whether it was a cancel or a save. So the first check we want to do is, I'm just going to get rid of the unwind segue source view controller for the time being. So the first check I want to do is if the unwind segue dot identifier is equal to save player details. Okay, if that's the case, then I have to update the user interface. If it's a cancel, I don't have to do anything. Okay, and then I also want to get rid of that saving. So saving is going to start to be annoying. I think we got rid of it already. That looks good. If I take Aaron Rodgers and I, just add something to his name, the third, okay, and I hit save, you'll notice that it's saying that I should update the user interface. And where that's coming from is in the master table view controller. We unwound to that player's table view controller, the master. We unwound to it from the save. and we're verifying that they actually hit save. As opposed to if we go back over to the simulator, we enter Aaron Rodgers and we edit this record again and we hit cancel, you'll notice that we just go back, but it doesn't say that we should actually update the user interface. Okay, so now we're in the unwind, and what we want to do is we want to get that source view controller. Okay, so the source view controller, where we actually came from, it's going to be from our unwind segue, and then there's a source, but the source by default is just a generic UI view controller, so we have to cast it as a player details table view controller. Okay, and that's where that's coming from. So once we have the source view controller, that source view controller, which is a table details view controller, what it's going to do is it's going to have a player. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to see if there is a selected index path. So we want to see if that player already exists inside of our list. So we're going to say if let selected index path equal to our table view. So we're going to our table view, and we want to say we want an index path for a selected row. So the row that we want is, sorry, not just index path. We want index path for selected row. This one. So if that's the case, so if we can get a selected index path, then we're talking about an edit operation because the record actually already exists. Otherwise, we're talking about an add operation. Okay, so we're looking to say, is there a selected index path? Okay, and then what we can do is we can say self.players selected index path .row equals our source view controller dot the player. And the player we're going to force unwrap, and the reason for that is because we know that we're in a save operation, so we know that the player is populated as opposed to a cancel operation. Okay, and then once we do that, we have to reload that particular row so we can actually see it on the user interface. So I'm going to go to the table view, and then there's a reload rows. Add a selected index path. Sorry, I want to show you this. Table view, reload rows, and you'll notice this blue highlighted area here. It's showing this index path as an array. So it's expecting an array of rows that you might want to reload. We only want to reload one specific row. So we're going to use the selected index path. And then the animation that we want is none. We're just going to reload the data. Okay, so this is for an edit. Okay, so we should be able to see this right now. And I'm not doing anything for the add, so the add is not going to work, but the edit should at this point, if we've done things correctly. Okay, so I want to change Mike Trout to Michael. Okay, and I'm choosing the name because that's visual on the master screen. So I hit save, and you'll notice that that Michael record is getting edited. If I change it back and I hit save, you'll notice it changes back. If I change it and I cancel, nothing happens. Okay, so we're able to select a row, make changes, and then update the master record to those saved changes. Okay, so our edit, I think, is working properly. Our add is a little bit tougher. So what we want to do is we want to say we want a new index path. So we want to say let new index path equal to an index path. And the way the index path works is I need to tell it the row in the section. So the row that I want to use is self.players.count. And the section that I want to use is section 0, because there's only one section. So that's our new index path. And then I should be able to add our new person. And the new person that I want to add is our source view controller's the player. And again, I'm force unwrapping that. And I guess maybe I want to refactor this a little bit. So the source view controller, the player, I might have some kind of conditional in here. So I might say if let the player equal to, then do all this stuff. And it should exist, but I'm just being a little bit cautious. Then I can use the player as opposed to the source view controller's the player. And same thing here, I can use the player because I've conditionally unwrapped it. As long as it exists, then I'm going to create a variable that is non-optional. Okay, so I append the new player, and then I'm going to go to the table view, and I'm going to insert rows at my new index path. And again, it's saying insert rows. The new index path has got to be put into an array. With my animation, I'll use automatic this time. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this now. And I want to add a new player. So my new player is going to be Babe Ruth for the New York Yankees. And I actually don't know what number he was. I'm just choosing 3. And you'll notice that Babe Ruth shows up here. I can add another player. So John Elway for the Denver Broncos. And I think he was number 7. So there's John Elway. And for some reason I lost Babe Ruth. Why did I lose Babe Ruth? If I add a new record, another, yeah, I don't know if I deleted Babe Ruth or what happened with Babe Ruth, but I don't think I did. I think I might have just edited Babe Ruth as opposed to actually adding a new record. Okay. I think that's what happened there. I'm not positive, but that's my hope. So let's try that again. Babe Ruth, New York Yankees, number 3. And what's going on is when I select this record, so when I select this record and then I hit add, so I select it, it takes me into the edit. If I cancel, that record is still selected. And what I'm doing is checking, is there a selected record to find? And if there is, then that should be the one that's getting edited. What I want to do is I want to fix that. So as I prepare for my segue, so here's my prepare for segue. Ideally, what I want to do is I want to check. So I'm setting the selected player equal to nil, but I actually want to do that same thing for my selected index path, the index path for selected row. So I don't want there to be a selected row. So really what I want to do is I want to take my table view, what's the command to stop the selection? I thought it was just selected row. Yeah, so I think it's table view dot deselect row, table view dot deselect row at index path. Deselect row at index path. And the way I want to deselect that row is I want to use the table view dot selected but I only want to do this if table view. I only want to do this if the user's actually clicking add. So what I want to do is I want to determine what type of segue we're actually doing. So there's a player selected segue. That's not the one that I'm looking for. So if not segue dot identifier, the segue identifier is not equal to player selected segue, then we want to deselect that row. Okay, and I am not sure why it's complaining. Oh, if I can create a variable for the selected row equal to table view dot index path for selected row, then we'll do this. And then I'll just use the selected row. Okay, I think that should take care of the issue that we were having. So the issue that we were having is if I add a record, that works fine. So I can say Babe Ruth, New York Yankees, number 3, and save him. So he shows up here, that works fine. If I select him, he's the selected row, and I'm going to cancel. But then I go ahead and he's still the selected row, but what I want to do now is I want to add a completely new record. So I'm going to go ahead and add John Elway. And I want to save that record. Okay, and now you'll notice that it's working properly. And what was happening to me is when we come back down to this unwind, what was happening is we were saying, is there a selected index path? Meaning we're in an edit operation. Meaning I should just update that selected record with the player that came from our details table view controller. Well, in this instance, that's not what I wanted to do. I had selected it, canceled, came back, and now I'm doing an add. And when I do that add, what I really want to do is when I do the add, I really want to make sure that there is no selected row, because that was going to cause problems with my edit. Okay, so now if we look at our application, we have the capability of removing records. Okay, so we can remove records. We can edit an existing record. So we could say, well, Derek Jeter is really, he's going to play for the Mets. Okay, so we change his team. So Derek Jeter has been modified, so we're able to edit records, and we're able to add new records. Okay, and we're able to cancel out of those operations if we want to. All the while, our table view controllers are maintaining the data that we have within our player collection that we got from our model. So we have a player class definition and a player manager that got our initial list of players, but our initial list of players eventually gets handed off to our table view controller. So we're maintaining this collection of players, and this is kind of our ultimate data source. So the users are adding records, modifying records, deleting records, this is kind of the truth of our application. The data that's actually getting rendered is this collection of players right here in my table view controller. Okay, so this video is just an expansion of our master details concept. So in this video, we just added add, edit, and delete to our master view, our master details application where we're using iOS UI table view controllers.